I was born in the early 1990s in a rural area of Pennsylvania, USA. It's well known that kids in the countryside often play in a more free and wild manner. Back then, the power supply in the countryside was tight at night, often cutting off from 4 in the afternoon until after midnight. This period coincided with our return home from school and dinner time, and we could almost finish our homework before the sun set around 7:30 to 8 o'clock. At night, with a lack of entertainment in the countryside, people would usually gather in the street after dinner. The women would chat together until after midnight before going to sleep, and us kids would play in the streets to our heart's content. This incident occurred against such a backdrop. Looking back now, it feels incredibly surreal. The fright at the time made my memory particularly hazy, as if watching someone else through a mirror, giving a sense of displacement. I remember it was a very comfortable summer evening. I was about 8 or 9 years old. After dinner, my classmates and I were running around in the street, the adults too, busy chatting to pay much attention to us. As it got dark, we could barely see each other's outlines, unable to tell who was who without speaking. It's unclear who suggested playing hide and seek, but after a few rounds, it was my classmate's younger brother's turn to be it. His sister and I hid on either side of their house's door, me on one side, she on the other. After hiding, I sneakily glanced her way, feeling like there were 2 people hiding beside her. However, since the game had already started, I didn't think much of it. Soon we were all found. But her brother saw her from a distance and, unable to keep quiet, immediately shouted, "Sis, come out, I see you. Who's behind you? I see you too, come out, don't try to cheat." Both she and I came out thinking he was calling to me, so I followed suit. We didn't dwell on it at the time. After he found a few more people, the game ended, and by the rules, the first person found had to be it in the next round. Next, it was her turn to be it, and the rest of us began to hide. Her brother followed me, asking, "Why were you two so silly, hiding together?" I replied, "No, it was just me by myself, and her by herself. Besides, that spot by the door is too small for 2 people to hide." While I was still hiding, I suddenly heard her sister crying very loudly. Her brother and I, puzzled, looked at her crying alone and ran over to see why. The adults noticed too, thinking we were fighting. She said her arm hurt. "It really hurts. It really hurts." Her mom came over to ask what happened, and she explained that while hiding, she felt someone grab her arm, which didn't hurt much at first, but now was very painful. Her mom was confused, asking me who had grabbed her, but I had no idea since we were hiding separately and I hadn't touched her. Before I could finish, she told her mom she couldn't lift her arm because it hurt so much. Her brother also started to hurt, leading to bouts of crying and screaming. Their mom, looking worried, said they needed to see a doctor at the clinic. As we were about to leave, both of them were writhing in pain on the ground, screaming about their stomachs hurting. Their cries of agony were piercing and frightening. Seeing the situation was serious, everyone prepared to call a doctor, but just as we were about to leave, she and her brother suddenly stopped crying. The adults quickly carried them home, where both seemed lifeless, their chests showing no signs of breathing. Her mom started crying, and an experienced old lady suggested that they might have bumped into something, meaning they encountered a ghost in our area. I was young at the time, watching the adults cry and panic, feeling both mystified and scared. Her mom then asked me, "Where were you playing just now? Did you see anything?" I was so panicked I could hardly remember anything. Her mom urged me to say anything I saw, not to leave anything out. I recounted the events in full, not fully understanding the concept of ghosts at that time. The old lady then suggested calling her grandmother, a well-known witch in our area who usually worked at the funeral home applying makeup to the deceased. My mom had always forbidden me from playing at her house. Around 10 o'clock at night, her mom brought her grandmother to our house. Upon entering, her grandmother immediately said the doorstep needed to be removed, then went to see her and her brother. By then, both were unconscious, their mom worried and scared, her face pale, lips trembling. Her grandmother instructed their dad to bring the children's usual bowls, a kitchen knife, paper money, mugwort, and freshly drawn well water. She poured a mouthful of well water into each child's bowl, had them drink it, then overturned the bowls and split them in half with the knife, lightly cutting their collars with the knife afterward. They stopped crying and fussing. In less than 5 minutes, their breathing stabilized and they stopped complaining of pain, falling into a deep sleep. The family then burned the paper money and mugwort at home. Afterwards, they had us onlookers leave, hitting our bodies with mugwort and instructing us to wash our hands at the doorstep before going home. The next day, her mom came to our house to thank us for our help and said she had made some delicious food, delivering a bowl of meat to each household. After arriving, she started talking about the previous day's events. I was sitting nearby, doing homework, eavesdropping on their conversation. She mentioned how fortunate it was that her grandmother arrived in time. Otherwise, the children might not have been saved. It turns out that playing the previous day had attracted a ghost's attention. The ghost was possibly one of their uncles, who about a month earlier had been crushed to death by a train while working on the railway. His arm severed and his internal organs shattered. Since he was buried without all his organs, his stomach was filled with cotton. He had come to visit his family and wanted to take the children with him, leading to the incident. My mom asked how they knew it was their uncle. Her mom said that after we left the previous night, the children woke up in the middle of the night, saying they had dreamt their uncle was playing with them, taking them to his house. But when they arrived at their uncle's house, they found everything was made of paper. They heard someone calling them outside, and upon going out, they woke up. Her grandmother said it was their uncle missing them. He had loved them the most while alive, and they had not attended his funeral. Now he wanted them by his side. Hearing this, her mom cried. Since then, I rarely played at their house, perhaps out of fear. This is the story of my experience. Although my retelling may be a bit rambling and might not sound as scary, it's something I personally went through. Only those who have experienced it can truly understand the fear and incredulity it brings.